Floor manager. I'd been buying shares for 23 years and owned more of the company than his mother did. He had no idea. My name is James Henley. I'm 49 years old. I've been at Steel Point Industries for 23 years, and until this morning, I was the VP of Manufacturing Operations. Now, according to Austin Whitfield Jr., I'm a shift supervisor making 60% of what I made yesterday. The conference room smelled like fresh paint and expensive coffee. Steel Point had dropped 35 grand renovating this space 6 months ago. New carpet, leather chairs that cost more than most people make in a month, glass panels that made everything look modern and sleek. The mahogany table stayed though. You don't replace 20 feet of solid mahogany. Austin stood at the head of that table like he owned the place, which to be fair, his family kind of did, or thought they did. He had his MacBook open, eyes glued to the screen like he was reading cue cards for his own authority. 27 years old with an MBA from somewhere expensive and about as much real manufacturing experience as my coffee mug. Jim, he said, not bothering to look up from his screen, effective immediately. Your role is being restructured. We're transitioning you from VP of Manufacturing Operations to Shift Supervisor. Your compensation will be adjusted to reflect the scope of the new position. A 40% pay cut, just like that. $285,000 a year, down to $171,000. Read off his laptop like he was checking the weather. 8 people sat around that table. Nobody looked comfortable. A few shifted in their chairs. One kept clicking a pen, stopping, then clicking it again. Behind Austin, some young woman named Claire Stevens stood holding a tablet like it might protect her from what was happening. She stared at the floor. I sat at the far end of the table, hands folded, quiet, real quiet. I understand, I said 2 words. Austin looked up for maybe 2 seconds, then back down. He took my calm for surrender. Most people do. Here's what Austin Whitfield Jr. didn't know about me. My father, William Henley, lost his job at Bethlehem Steel in 1985. 23 years on the floor, and they shut down his plant like it was nothing. I watched that man, who could read a furnace like a book and fix anything with moving parts, spend the next 2 years looking for work that paid half what he used to make. He died in 1997, still believing he'd somehow failed his family. That's when I learned something the Marine Corps would later reinforce. If working folks like us want security, we have to build it ourselves. I joined the Marines right out of high school in 1991. Spent 8 years as a logistics specialist, did my time in the Gulf. The Corps taught me about supply lines, strategic positioning, and mission discipline. Most importantly, it taught me that patience isn't waiting around, it's operational readiness. Came back to an America that was still shutting down factories, still throwing away people like my father. But I had a plan. The military had shown me how to think in terms of objectives, resources, and long-term positioning. I came to Steel Point in 2001, straight off active duty, started on the foundry floor. Same kind of work my father did. Same furnaces, same molten metal, same 12-hour shifts. But this time, I understood the difference between being an employee and being an owner. The founder, William Steele, walked the floor every Friday back then. He was 71, still sharp, still smelled like cigar smoke and machine oil. He'd stop at every station, ask real questions, listen to real answers. Not the corporate listening you see nowadays, actual listening. He stopped at my station in November of my first year and watched me calibrate a pour sequence I'd redesigned to cut slag waste by 15%. Didn't say anything for a full minute. Then he reached into his jacket and handed me a pen. Silver, engraved. It said, SI Year 1, own what you build, son, he told me. Paper without equity is just paper. William Steele died 7 years later. I kept the pen and I did exactly what he told me to do. It started with the employee stock purchase plan. Steel Point offered shares at 15% discount to employees who reinvested their performance bonuses. Most people took the cash, bought trucks, paid off credit cards, took vacations. I took the stock, every quarter, every year, for 23 years. Half a point here, a full point there. The Marines had taught me that small advantages compound when you maintain operational discipline. Then came the private purchases. 3 retiring executives over 14 years each held blocks of Steel Point shares. Tom Richards, VP of Procurement, retired 17 years ago. He wanted liquidity for a lake house. I bought his block. Eddie Foster, Director of Quality Assurance, 13 years ago, same story. Patricia Wells, outgoing CFO, 8 years ago, she wanted a clean break. I gave her one. Every transaction documented, every transfer filed, every disclosure submitted to the SEC on time under the name Henley Holdings Trust. Mission planning, just like the Corps taught me. Objective, timeline, resources, documentation. The trust was my attorney's idea. Roger Hayes and I served together, same unit, both logistics specialists in the Gulf. He went to law school when he got out, ended up specializing in corporate securities at a firm in Cleveland. He's the only person alive who knows my full ownership position. Roger set up Henley Holdings Trust 22 years ago, my second year at Steel Point. Filed the original structure, tracked every acquisition, submitted every SEC Form 4 and Schedule 13D filing. When my beneficial ownership crossed 5%, then 10%, then 20%, then 30%. All public record, all sitting in the EDGAR database, all legal, all invisible to anyone who didn't bother to look. The last time anyone on the Steel Point Board of Directors reviewed the SEC ownership filings was 2015, 8 years ago. By then, I was already past 50%. Roger also made sure I understood Article 9 of the Steel Point Corporate Charter, Emergency Shareholder Governance Clause. He explained it over black coffee at a diner in Cleveland 6 years ago. This is your insurance policy, Jim. Pray you never need it. The language is specific. In the event that any officer of the corporation takes unilateral action affecting the compensation, title, or duties of any employee holding a majority stake in the corporation's issued shares without prior written consent of said shareholder, that shareholder may invoke Article 9 to convene an emergency board session within 36 hours. I own 63% of Steel Point Industries, market value approximately $1.3233 billion. And a 27-year-old with an MBA and a self-appointed title that was never ratified by the board had just cut my salary by 40% without asking me, the board, or his mother's general counsel. I didn't slam the conference room door, didn't raise my voice, didn't say a word to anyone on the way out. Walked to the elevator, pressed the button, rode it down alone. The fluorescent lights hummed the same way they'd hummed for 23 years. The concrete garage smelled like oil and exhaust. I sat in my truck for exactly 3 minutes. My wife, Elena's photo was clipped to the sun visor. She was laughing. Our son, Tyler, sitting on her lap at age 12, both of them squinting into the sun at some company picnic years ago. Elena always understood why I worked the way I did. She grew up watching her own father struggle after the textile mills closed. She knew what security meant to families like ours. Then I pulled out my phone and called Roger Hayes. He picked up on the second ring. I've been waiting for this call for about 5 years, he said. Roger didn't rush, Marines don't rush operations, and Roger doesn't rush legal filings. But he doesn't waste time either. Tell me exactly what happened, he said. I told him. The conference room, Austin's laptop, the demotion from VP to shift supervisor, the 40% salary cut. The 8 people who watched it happen. Claire Stevens standing behind Austin like she wished she was anywhere else. Roger was quiet for 4 seconds. I could hear him writing. His title, Roger said, Chief Operations Officer. Was it ratified by a full board resolution? No, I've read every board resolution for the last 10 years. There's no vote authorizing that title. His mother created it and installed him. 2 directors objected. She overrode them. And he took unilateral action affecting your compensation, title, and duties without your prior written consent. He did. Then Article 9 is live. I heard his chair creak, a desk drawer opening. I'll have the filing ready by 6 p.m. Emergency shareholder action under Article 9 of the Steel Point Corporate Charter, submitted on behalf of Henley Holdings Trust, beneficial owner of 63% of issued shares. The board will be required to convene within 36 hours. That puts us at Thursday morning 10 a.m. if they move fast. And they will move fast once Peter Coleman sees what's in the EGR database. Do it, I said. Already started. It was 4:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. Here's what I didn't do in the next 18 hours. I didn't call Austin. I didn't call Barbara Whitfield. I didn't call anyone at Steel Point. I didn't send emails or update LinkedIn or walk back into that building to warn anybody what was coming. I drove home, fed Max, my yellow lab who's been with me 9 years. He knew something had shifted the moment I walked through the door. Dogs know. He didn't bring me his tennis ball. Just sat next to my chair and put his chin on my knee. I poured 3 fingers of bourbon, not the daily stuff, the good bottle. Maker's Mark 46 from the bottle Elena gave me for my 45th birthday. I'd been saving it. Turns out this was what I was saving it for. I sat on the back deck and watched the sky go dark over the industrial district. You can see the Steel Point smokestacks from my house, about 2 miles away. I'd picked this house for that reason 18 years ago. Elena thought I was crazy. You want to stare at work from your porch, she'd said. I told her I wanted to see what I was building. I could see the lights in the executive suite from where I sat. 3rd floor, corner office, the one that used to be mine before Austin moved into it 4 months ago. The lights were still on. Good, let him enjoy it. At 6:15 p.m., Roger texted me. Filed. Clock's running. While I slept that night, here's what happened. Roger's filing landed in the corporate secretary's inbox at 6:18 p.m. Sandra Bell, who'd held that job for 12 years, opened it at 7:30 p.m. while eating leftover dinner at her desk. She read the first paragraph twice. Then she called Peter Coleman, the general counsel. Peter didn't answer. He was at his daughter's soccer game. Sandra left a voicemail. "Peter, we've received an Article 9 filing, emergency shareholder action. You need to call me tonight." Peter listened to it at 9:45 p.m. while loading the dishwasher. He called Sandra back. "Who filed it?" he asked. "An entity called Henley Holdings Trust." Henley, as in Jim Henley. The filing claims beneficial ownership of 63% of issued shares. Peter Coleman had been general counsel for 8 years. He was careful, competent, and deeply uncomfortable with what Austin had done. He hadn't been consulted before my demotion. Austin hadn't asked him. Austin hadn't asked anyone. Peter sat down at his home office at 10:20 p.m. and opened the SEC's EDJAR database, taped Steel Point Industries into the search field. The filings loaded. He started with the most recent Schedule 13D amendment, filed 6 months ago. Beneficial owner, Henley Holdings Trust. Percentage of class, 63.2%. He scrolled backward. Years of filings, Form 4S, documenting every acquisition. Share transfers from Richards, Foster, Wells. Quarterly purchases through the employee stock plan. Every single one documented, time-stamped, filed on schedule. He printed 52 pages. Peter told me later his hand started shaking at page 8. By page 20, he'd loosened his tie. By page 35, he'd poured himself something he doesn't normally drink on weeknights. By page 52, he was sitting very still in his chair, staring at the wall. The filing was perfect. Roger Hayes doesn't make mistakes. Roger builds paper trails the way we used to build supply lines in the Gulf. Every angle covered, every approach anticipated, every document cross-referenced. Peter picked up his phone. It was 11:25 p.m. on Tuesday. He called Barbara Whitfield. She answered on the 4th ring. Her voice was careful, controlled. "Peter, it's late. Barbara, I need you at headquarters first thing tomorrow morning. Your son just demoted someone he shouldn't have." "What are you talking about?" "Jim Henley owns 63% of this company, has for years. It's all in the SEC filings, every filing since his 2nd year of employment. And your son just cut his salary without board authorization, without legal review, and without the consent of the majority shareholder." Silence, 5 full seconds. "That's not possible. I'm looking at 52 pages of evidence that says it is. Barbara, that man has been our majority shareholder for over a decade, and we've been treating him like middle management." Another silence, longer. "Article 9 has been invoked. We're required to convene an emergency board session within 36 hours, Thursday morning 10 a.m. I need every director notified by 8 a.m. tomorrow. Peter, I also need to inform you that your son's title was never ratified by a full board resolution, which means his authority to restructure anyone's compensation is questionable, independent of the ownership issue." I'm told Barbara didn't speak for nearly 15 seconds. When she did, her voice was quieter. "Does Austin know?" "No, don't tell him. I'll handle it." She didn't handle it. Because while Barbara Whitfield sat in her bedroom processing the fact that her son had just kicked a hornet's nest worth $1.3 billion, Austin was on Instagram. His story, posted at 11:52 p.m., showed a glass of champagne on the desk that used to be mine. Caption, "Day 1 of restructuring complete. Phase 2 tomorrow." He had no idea the board had already been called. I woke up Thursday morning at 5:30, made black coffee, stood on the deck watching the Steel Point smokestacks against the gray sky. My phone had 16 missed calls when I finally looked at it. 4 from Peter Coleman, 3 from Barbara Whitfield's office, 5 from Austin, and 4 from numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't return any of them. At 9:45 a.m., I put on the charcoal suit Elena picked out for me 12 years ago. She said it made me look like I owned something. I adjusted the tie, slipped William Steele's pen into my breast pocket, and drove to Steel Point. I parked in the main lot where the floor workers park. I'd been parking there for 23 years. Roger was waiting in the 3rd floor hallway outside conference room A. Navy suit, black briefcase with scuffed leather and bent brass clasps. The same one he'd carried through law school. "You ready?" he asked. I've been ready for 5 years. The boardroom doors were frosted glass and mahogany. Same room I'd been demoted in 48 hours earlier. But today there were nameplates at every seat. 9 directors, every chair filled. Peter Coleman sat with a stack of documents thick enough to stop a bullet. Sandra Bell sat behind him with a legal pad. Barbara Whitfield sat at the head of the table, hands flat on the surface, face composed and gray. At the opposite end from Barbara, one empty chair. The nameplate read, Henley Holdings Trust, majority shareholder. Roger set his briefcase next to the chair and sat behind me. He didn't open it. Everything that mattered was already in Peter's stack. I sat down, placed William Steele's pen on the table, folded my hands. The clock read 9:58 a.m. At 9:59, Austin walked in. Slim navy suit, silk tie, fresh haircut. MacBook under his arm. He walked like a man who owned the room. He saw the nameplates, saw the 9 directors, saw Peter's documents, saw Roger with his briefcase. Saw me at the end of the table. Mom, what is this? Barbara didn't look at him. Sit down, Austin. I wasn't informed of a board session. If this is about the restructuring rollout, sit down. He sat. Peter Coleman stood. This emergency session has been convened pursuant to Article 9 of the Steel Point Industries Corporate Charter. The filing was submitted Tuesday evening by Henley Holdings Trust on behalf of Jim Henley. The filing asserts that an officer took unilateral action affecting the compensation and duties of an employee holding a majority stake without prior consent. Peter picked up the top sheet from his stack. Henley Holdings Trust holds 63% of Steel Point Industries issued shares. This position has been documented in continuous SEC filings for 22 years at current company valuation of $1 billion. Mr. Henley's stake represents approximately $1.323 billion, and one director leaned back and exhaled. Another closed her eyes. Austin looked at me. For the first time since I'd known him, he wasn't performing. Those filings can't be. They're bulletproof, Roger said from behind me. Every threshold reported, every transfer executed legally, every disclosure filed on schedule. 22 years of documentation, Peter continued. Additionally, the title of Chief Operations Officer was never ratified by a full board resolution. It was created by executive memo without formal vote. Austin's hands were flat on the table. His face had lost color. This is a clerical issue, Austin said. A filing discrepancy, Austin. Barbara's voice was quiet. Stop talking. Peter looked around the table. A motion is before the board to reverse all restructuring actions taken by Austin Whitfield under an unratified title and to remove Mr. Whitfield from his position effective immediately. He called the vote. One by one, every director stated their vote out loud. 8 directors. 8 yes votes. Peter looked at Barbara, Chair Whitfield. Barbara lifted her head. She looked at her son. He stared at her with the expression of a man who just realized the ground wasn't solid. Yes, Barbara said. 9-0, unanimous. The motion carries. Mr. Whitfield, your position is terminated effective immediately. Austin stood up, his chair rolled back and hit the credenza. He looked at me. You sat there Tuesday, he said. You said, I understand. I looked at him. I did understand. Better than you. Security walked in. Eddie Rodriguez, who'd been working the desk for 14 years, accompanied by a second officer. Eddie's face was professional, but I'd known him long enough to see the corner of his mouth. Austin looked at his mother one more time. She was staring at the table. He walked out. The board session continued for 2 hours. Here's what matters. They voted unanimously to appoint me interim CEO, effective immediately. My compensation was restored and restructured upward to reflect the new role. Within 30 days, the board would formalize the appointment pending standard governance review. They also approved a special dividend distribution, $45 million total. My 63% stake entitled me to $28.35 million of that payout. $28.35 million deposited into Henley Holdings Trust on a Tuesday, exactly 4 weeks after I'd been told I was being demoted to shift supervisor. Within 60 days, minority shareholders filed a lawsuit against Austin Whitfield personally, alleging unauthorized restructuring actions that exposed the company to material governance risk. Last I heard, his attorneys were struggling to negotiate a settlement. Barbara Whitfield resigned from the board 1 week after the vote. Didn't make a statement, didn't send company emails, just signed the letter, handed it to Sandra Bell and walked out. Her 3.8% stake remains, but she'll never sit at that table again. Austin's Instagram post is still in the legal record. Screenshot, time-stamped, entered as evidence. His restructuring phase 2 never happened. Grace Martinez was promoted to director of floor operations. She'd earned it 15 years ago. When I told her, she stood in my doorway and said, about time. I agreed. I kept the corner office. Put Elena's photo on the desk, the same one from the sun visor. Put William Steele's pen in the top drawer. The nameplate on the door says CEO. But that's not the one that matters. The one that matters is the small brass plate on my desk that says Henley. 3 months later, Tyler called on a Sunday, every Sunday, like clockwork. The kid's reliable, gets it from his mother. Dad, you sound different, he said, like you're not waiting for something anymore. I was sitting on the deck. Max was lying at my feet. The Steel Point smokestacks were visible against the evening sky, same as always. The lights in the executive suite were on. My lights now. Maybe I'm not, I said. You still coming to the softball game Saturday? Engineering League, it's terrible, but you'd love it. I'll be there. Really, really. He was quiet for a second. "That's good, Dad, that's really good." I hung up and sat there for a while. The bourbon was on the side table. 3 fingers, the good stuff from Elena's bottle. I took a sip and watched the sky go dark over the industrial district. Same view I'd been looking at for 18 years. Same smokestacks, same work, same commitment to building something that lasts. Austin Whitfield told a boardroom I was just a floor manager. He was right about one thing. I knew every floor in that building. Every furnace by sound, every pressure point, every person who walked through those doors at 6 a.m. to build something real with their hands. He just didn't know I also owned the building. Sometimes power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't post champagne on Instagram or drop MBA credentials in every meeting or give itself titles nobody voted on. Sometimes it just shows up quarter after quarter, year after year, half a point here, full point there. Patient, quiet, documented, legal. The Marines taught me that operational discipline beats tactical flashiness every time. My father taught me that working folks deserve security, not just paychecks. Elena taught me that building something worthwhile takes time, patience, and faith in the process. When everything finally comes together, it doesn't make a sound until the whole world's already changed. 6 months after the board vote, Steel Point Industries reported record quarterly profits. Employee retention hit an all-time high. Our safety metrics improved by 23%. We expanded our workforce by 180 people, all good manufacturing jobs with full benefits and stock purchase options. The financial press called it a remarkable turnaround. Industry analysts praised our renewed focus on operational excellence. None of them mentioned that we'd simply gone back to being run by people who understood the work. William Steele's pen sits in my desk drawer, right next to the original employment contract I signed 23 years ago. Sometimes I take it out and look at the engraving. SI Year 1, own what you build, he'd told me. Paper without equity is just paper. He was right. But it's more than that. You can't own what you don't understand, and you can't understand what you don't respect. Austin Whitfield never learned that lesson. Maybe he'll figure it out someday, but it won't be at my company. If you've ever worked for someone who confused their title with their authority, who thought your quiet competence meant you were powerless, who believed their connections mattered more than your contributions, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The system isn't always fair, but it can be if you're patient enough, smart enough, and disciplined enough to work within it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting ownership. And sometimes if you're willing to play the long game, the guys who think they run everything find out they don't run anything at all.